Good morning. This is my third reading from my essay that accompanies the exhibition, The Homage to Danila Vasiliev, which is on at Mars Gallery in Windsor in Melbourne until the end of October, perhaps into November. A beautiful morning in Mildura, and I'll continue reading. My last sentence yesterday was this one. But in the end, finding it or not doesn't seem to matter much. Either way, I have recently concluded the search itself has been most rewarding. On such mornings, I've come to deeply appreciate how the light shimmers on the flowing water, how it affects the mind and how it transports the observer to other spaces, other times, and to other unexpected thoughts. So much so that I would sometimes forget what the purpose of my walk was, what I'd been searching for. At such times, walking along the river's edge has been the key to a deeper understanding of how living in such close proximity to its endless flow can affect one's sense of time. I've spent many hours in the presence of your last paintings, Danila, now in the collection of the Mildura Art Centre, into which you translated, even transmuted, the river's life force and its ancient power into your own pictorial language. I've concluded that no matter how different these paintings look from those you made some 30 years earlier when you walked the Fitzroy streets, the urge to search for and transmit whatever truth you happen to be facing at each moment still motivated all your decisions, even as you reached the end of your life. This commitment to truth-telling through your art has come to constitute for me an exemplary act of courage. At times, as I've walked along the river's banks, I've considered whether there might be an action more courageous than simply saying what is, especially if what one holds dear is at stake, like happiness or peace of mind, or right to joy, or even one's career. And I've concluded that there is not. Consequently, over the last couple of years, I've increasingly longed to find a way to pay homage to you, Danila, and all that your actions have taught me. Perhaps not so much taught, because I cannot claim to have learnt much in my life as an artist, but more in recognition of the insights your lifelong commitment keeps offering us all. You attempted to pass on such insights to many, of course, of all ages and backgrounds, but your approach to the creative life was never accepted by those who could have facilitated its legitimacy beyond the limited bounds of the schools you briefly taught in, or the social circus as well. Circles you temporarily, albeit awkwardly, frequented. Pardon me for saying this, because of course you know it well. Towards the end of your life, you remarked on it often. You were, as all migrants understandably are, limited in your understanding of what was acceptable behaviour in a world that was not your own. Beyond that, you were too easily irritated, as you have freely admitted, by your belief that most of your peers followed oppressively restrictive societal conventions. This aspect of your character meant that even if your presence was a source of stimulation, of pleasure, albeit for many at a safe distance, your utter rejection of convention made it almost impossible for the broad range of your peers to fully embrace you, either as an artist or as a companion. Your creative output, like your essence, was hewn out of humble, easy-to-source materials, Most of your paintings were made using oil tubes discarded by others or half-empty tins of leftover house enamel paint, all applied to raw plywood surfaces, devoid of a gesso ground or any preparation at all. You quarried your own granite and limestone sourced in the hills around Warrandyte, using it to either build your own house, which you aptly named Stonygrad, or to carve your luminously sinewy forms, seeing no boundary between your lived life and your practice. As a consequence, you lived your relationships spontaneously, improvising endlessly, much as you might with a painting or a sculpture. This, of course, didn't endear you to many of your companions. Most of your final works, found loosely piled on the dirt floor of your last home, the tiny fishing hut in Baronga, were painted on torn sheets of the Sunraysia Daily, the Mallee's local newspaper, published here in Mildura. Inevitably, every time I leaf through an edition or even simply see a copy, I think of you. You had always believed that what was necessary to make your work was already in front of you. You didn't need to seek the right materials, because in your view, they were always already at hand, however and from wherever they might have appeared. You consequently made no qualitative or aesthetic judgment about any potentially usable material, and then, in order to reach new and unexpected outcomes, you simply employed it for a new task. Once launched into a new venture, you work with an urgent release of feeling, purposely bypassing the technical aspects of any project you were focused on, which were then universally respected and accepted as the parameters of quality by fellow artists, by critics, and consequently by collectors. You believe these techniques and conventions to be no more than hindrances to guaranteeing the authenticity of what you witnessed, as well as its subsequent expression. And the single most important quality, the crucial catalyst that finally transmuted into manifest form the countless insights that swirled formlessly within the crucible of your consciousness, was courage. The courage to uphold your beliefs against the mainstream current, and the courage to resist when it was offered the seduction of honours and praise from those whose views you could not align with. Finally, the courage to live with dignity in the midst of utter rejection, a condition common to many of those who choose the creative life. In light of my understanding, or perhaps it's more appropriate to define these thoughts as assumptions, or even simply intuitions, of how your inner life defined your actions and then their eventual outcomes, I considered over the past year just how I might approach the making of my homage to you. I eventually decided that in order to acknowledge your quintessential philosophy, obtained by subjecting various contrary beliefs to the fiery crucible of your being, as authentically as possible, I needed to adopt your approach to practice so that I could eventually shape my homage into its appropriate danila form. Consequently, I decided to use only what materials I could source from my own archives and studio as a platform for the homages, each now awaiting a newly repurposed destiny as components of an entwining. But beyond using materials sourced from my archive as components of each of these energetic entwinings, what might constitute their content, danila? I decided to assemble each one around an image of one of your paintings, chosen at random from a selection of your work ranging from the 1930s to the 1950s. But how would I begin? And now I must end for today. I'll continue tomorrow. Thanks for your attention.